Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your boys from For Those With Good Taste. I'm Matt. He's Lenny.
Yo, what up?
Thanks for joining us today. So, what can we talk about today? Well, we had some UFC fights this past weekend.
I had a couple of them.
Yeah.
Mainly one that we talked about, and the rest of them were awful.
Yeah, not really anything to write home about, besides maybe a pretty awesome head kick KO in a different organization.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. But it's funny where I felt like I came off a weekend and I was like, oh, look, that was a little bit of a letdown. But I think it's just because we've been coming off of so many highs week in and week out of really great fights. And we still did get a great fight this weekend. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, definitely a possible fight of the year contender. And I got to take back everything I said about Frankie Edgar. I mean, down at 135 pounds, he certainly showed that he's still got a lot left in the tank.
Yeah, can we just give me a quick round of applause?
Didn't waste any time there.
Golf clap. Your boy is no longer over. I got myself a W this week. It felt good, and I was biting my nails at the very end there. I was nervous.
So what'd you think of the fight, Len?
I loved it, man. It was we were talking during the fight, and I was sitting there and I was like, dude, this is like there. By the second round, I texted you. And I think I literally said, I love watching Frankie Edgar fight. And it was just because there was pace, like this high pace, this tension the whole time because it's a big game of cat and mouse. It's
from the start.
Yeah, Munhoz is just cutting off the cage, stopping him wherever he's going, and he's just throwing bombs at this dude. But Edgar, trademark as always, like throwing 1-2s.
Taking shots while throwing those 1-2s.
Yeah, and giving them back. I heard, I think it was Luke Thomas was talking about, like, you know, the sad thing is power is typically what they say is the last thing to go, and you would have hoped that Frankie Edgar would have had maybe a little bit more pop on his punches. But at the same time, we did just talk about last week how Munhoz had that like barn burner with Cody Garbrandt.
Right.
So maybe he's just got a steel chin because he was definitely getting popped. He got rocked in the 5th round really quick with what looked like a right hook, I think.
Right hook.
Yeah, I loved it, man. How about you?
I absolutely loved it because we got to see a showcase of different skills. From Pedro Munhoz constantly pushing with that calf kick, doing some real damage at the beginning of the fight. I was a little bit concerned for Frankie. I was like, man, if he starts chopping away at those legs, Frankie's biggest asset is his movement. And if he's not able to move, this can become a really ugly fight for Frankie. But for me, vintage Frankie Edgar fight, back and forth, did not disappoint.
Did you see Frankie Edgar after he was leaving the cage?
I did not.
He could barely walk.
I stepped away to use it. I came back for his post-fight interview.
Yeah, so it was like I already knew this guy's tough as nails, but he at that point is like done with the fight. He's gutted out 5 rounds where he basically couldn't. It seemed like he was having trouble from about the 3rd on.
Oh yeah.
For a solid 10 to 15 minutes, really struggled with walking and his movement. He just kept it up because of how tough he was. So when you see the adrenaline come down on these guys and the pain starts to really settle in, it was jarring to see him like trying to walk out of the cage.
I think that's why I'm not a huge fan of these like studio-like interviews that they do post-fight now. I like that in the octagon moment because you're getting them still riding that high where they feel at their greatest moments. Man, we're seeing interviews where Frankie he didn't look like he could be there. It looked like it was tough for him to kind of, sit there and entertain the interview. But in typical Frankie Edgar form, you got to love the guy after the fight because he's always talking about his next move.
Yeah, so I was kind of the opposite from you. I saw him get out of the cage, but I actually stopped watching at that point. So I didn't catch the post-fight. I do remember the post-fight. I think it was maybe last week. Maybe it was this week, but there was the gentleman who was like completely out of breath from his fight. And John Anik was trying to talk to him. And he just was like, he looked like me after jogging like a half a mile. He was just like heaving. And he's just like, give me a second. I'll be done. And John's like, no, man, like I get it, take your time, but we gotta
speed this up. You're not even the main guy on this fight tonight.
Yeah. So it is a really weird like atmosphere, and it's funny because even Joe Rogan's no longer immune to this because when the first card happens post COVID. Was like, fuck no, like I'm going
getting in the octagon
because I need to talk to these guys. Even now, he has to talk to them over the monitor, which it's not a big deal. But you are right; there is a certain come down that you get from being in the octagon to them being out of the octagon, and how you kind of, or I'm sure you feel. You're starting to have those aches and pains start to kick in.
Starting to kick in. That adrenaline's wearing off.
It's a shit ton easier to be the winner, though, I'd say.
I would imagine Derek Lewis is probably the only one who can have the same interview inside the octagon as outside of the octagon. But, going back to this fight, I think that not only did we see the best of Frankie Edgar, but I think Pedro Munhoz's stock, despite the loss, goes way up because it's a great performance against a veteran. Probably puts his name on the map a little bit more on those rankings. He came in ranked at number 5. Frankie, unfortunately, was not ranked at that weight class.
Never fought at it, though.
What do you think this does for his potential future?
I think that's the big question is where does he go from here? And as far as ranking, you got to drop him in the top 10. Nowhere near top 5. I'd imagine he's somewhere in the 8 to 10 range because he's got a little bit of stuff to prove. It's funny, last week we played Dominic Cruz Matchmaker, though, and I see him being the easiest to make matchup coming off of this fight. A guy that makes sense for both of them. They're in the same tier of their career. They have great accomplishments to match up to each other. And it's a dream fight, so to speak. It's one that, like, they've been 2 weight classes apart for a lot of their early career, so it's interesting to see them kind of meeting now.
Yeah, and I talk about how Pedro Munhoz or you talk about how he possibly falls out of the top 10. The opposite happens for Frankie. Now, he plunges himself into contender status.
I meant Frankie is 8 to 10.
Okay, yeah.
Munhoz, I think you keep him probably right around 10.
So when we talk about Frankie possibly fighting Dominic Cruz, I mean, that's a fight that casual fans, I think, would get excited for, because when you talk about guys that are going to put on a show, that are going to be performing mixed martial arts at its finest, where they're able to utilize movement, utilize, different striking, wrestling would get really interesting if it got down to the ground between Cruz and Edgar. Man, I'd love to see that fight.
Yeah, I would say you're going to probably end up getting some motion sickness off of the constant just angles that are being cut. And Dominic Cruz is even crazier than Frankie Edgar. Like, Frankie Edgar's got more of a traditional look to his movement.
Boxing.
Yeah, Dominic Cruz is completely different.
Well, we saw Dominic Cruz when he fought TJ Dillashaw in the Garden in Boston, and it even became difficult for us to follow it, from the stands into the game. We found ourselves looking at the monitor. But when you look at that fight, Frankie's got nowhere to go but up right now. That was a huge win for him. Do you think that's the next fight that gets made?
I would hope so. It's always going to be with Cruz what his health situation is like. And what's his urgency to want to get out there? This seems like a fight that he would jump at because it's a name guy that if he gets a win over him, it puts him back in a conversation where maybe one fight against a younger guy puts him in there. I do have some concerns for Frankie Edgar, and the reason I would make this a good fight for him is it's a very winnable fight for him, is I look at the top 5 and I do say, is he going to be able to take damage from all of these top 135ers? I have some faith because they don't hit as hard as maybe what he's been going against.
So tell that to Petroyan.
Yeah, well, that's the one. That's the big one, right?
Yeah.
But I look at maybe Aljamain Sterling.
Sure.
What are they going to have, a grappling match? I just don't know what's going to happen there. Maybe you do go. We talked about Aldo last week. Maybe you get an Aldo Frankie 3 at just another weight class.
Yeah, and I brought up the Aldo Frankie 3. I think that, to me, may not be as appealing as the Dominic Cruz fight, but definitely has the backstory there. Someone else who came to mind who could probably use a win off of a big name, and depending on how they want to use him, is the head case known as Cody Garbrandt. That could be an interesting
Cody's
fight.
Fighting for a belt, my man.
That's correct. What am I talking about?
He's dropping down to 125, and he is fighting for a belt.
He's picking on the little guys.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame him, right? Did we want to see him jump into a title fight at 135 right away?
There's a lot of interesting matchups there for him.
There's more money to be made. Go down to 125, win the belt, come back up to 135, and go for a double strap and reclaim your championship.
Makes a lot of sense. And that's not really the only... I guess there's a couple of different ways that you can look at it. For me, there's a lot of big fights. Frankie's got a plethora of choices. He should have a ranking next to his name, and we'll see what ends up happening after this.
Yeah, like I said, I imagine they drop him in the top 10, and then you just have a conversation as to, do we want to try and build another name like we tried to do this weekend, or do we want to make a matchup that I could see a third from the top on a pay-per-view card, Edgar versus Cruz, selling pretty well, or main eventing any fight night. Just looking at the people that they have main event fight nights these days. Sure. What is it? Overeem versus Sakai.
Sakai.
Like those are the main events you got for that. So sticking that type of fight at the top of a card on free TV seems like it'd be a really, really smart move. And
I think we both know we don't want to see anything less than a 5-round fight with Frankie Edgar.
I'd be cool with it either way, because I do think that there is a certain thing to him in a 3-round fight, which is that energy can go even crazier.
Sure.
And a guy who does find himself, he comes on late in fights, but he also loses some of those later rounds, and he's seems like he's always in split decisions. If we looked at all-time split decisions, he's got to be very close to the top. So I don't, like I said, I could see him in third from the top on a pay-per-view, and I wouldn't mind 3 rounds. But of course, sign me up for as many rounds of Frankie Edgar fighting at the end of his career so I can just kind of have those memories.
And we love Frankie Edgar here. So we go from one organization. Let's take it to Bellator really quickly, because a household name, at least in the MMA community, with Ryan Bader taking a huge head kick KO in defense of his light heavyweight title there in Bellator.
A title that he had not defended for 3 years, people.
He was too busy going to heavyweight and doing things up there. So
putting in work. I don't want to insult the guy. 3 years from light heavyweight wasn't like I sat on my ass for 3 years. It's like I went out and won another title. I beat Fedor. I beat Matt Mentrione.
He put some respect on his name.
Yeah,
so to speak.
I think if anything, these past 3 years have been far kinder to Bader, to where I didn't even know he was fighting though this weekend. And
there wasn't a lot of hype around it.
Yeah, I was flipping through the channels and all of a sudden I was like, oh, I think maybe it was on Instagram or something. I don't know, but it was like, oh shit, like Ryan Bader's fighting tonight. Like, let me throw on TV. I'm not doing anything. Let me check that out. Yeah. And I end up watching it, and I'm like, good fight. I can't remember the kid's name right now off the top of my head, but I was really into him. But Bader he didn't look like, maybe he just couldn't get that physique back, losing the weight from heavyweight. Or maybe he just didn't think that he had to. Maybe he didn't take it seriously. Yeah,
if you spend 3 years not worrying about weight cutting, it's going to play a factor when you actually think about going back down in weight. And, maybe he didn't look sluggish. I didn't spend as much time watching the fight. But when you look at a head kick like that, the idea that he's now going to go up to heavyweight and possibly defend that title later on in the year doesn't do a lot for his status right now.
He's the good thing is at heavyweight, he's a very physical guy. So his wrestling prowess does great. He's also able to have a speed and athleticism advantage over a lot of heavyweight fighters. So I'd see him having more success going forward in the heavyweight division.
Or knock that thing over.
So he'll have more luck in the heavyweight division. The thing about him at light heavyweight is he doesn't have great defense to begin with. I don't think he exits straight out the back. His feet kind of look all over the place.
Doesn't have great head movement. Like his head and shoulders, if we want to go trunk movement.
There it is.
If we want to go trunk movement, he's very compact and there's not a lot going on there.
He's your old school wrestler boxer, right? He stands really square with a wrestling stance in a way and throws heavy overhands.
Yeah, and overhand rights is how he made his name.
He had a really nice jab too. I think he has a nice jab, but he also he throws bombs as far as his hooks are concerned. But that kid he fought, no disrespect for him, I wish I knew his name. He looked great.
Yeah, we're not doing him a service here.
He's from the Fedor camp, so he got a measure of revenge for his idol who got knocked out by Bader last year. It was exciting to see. Not exciting enough for Scott Coker to go into the media and claim that he has the best light heavyweight division on earth, though.
Especially when probably the most known guy in that division just got head kicked and is possibly going up to heavyweight.
Well, that's the crazy thing is it's so easy to pick apart. It's such a great division, but none of them could fight for a title in 3 years. They had Tito beat their Liam McCary, right?
Liam McGarry.
Who was on the come up. So you had Tito wipe away that guy in a great moment, great fight. But that wiped away guy you were trying to claim was a contender. You've had King Mo, another one who was you're
naming a lot of guys over 35, over 36.
That's their old division. I'm sure they have some young kids that are good because there's young kids that are good everywhere now. You go to one championship and you're going to find young kids that are great, right?
The sport's evolved.
But you can't tell me that you have a better division than the UFC at the light heavyweight division because light heavyweight's notoriously thin across the board. So for you to tell me that you have the best one, but I can only name 3 fighters, and the guy who's your champion now, his name escapes me.
He's got no stock vested in him right now.
Yep.
And then you look at what's going on in the UFC. They've just kind of across the board kind of set up this tournament style of light heavyweight fights. I mean, Dana White, aside from his smirky comment about Oscar De La Hoya, if you haven't seen it, go check it out. Did you see this?
Refresh my memory.
So a reporter says, "Hey, Dana, how do you feel about your friend Oscar De La Hoya returning to boxing?" And Dana just gives a quick glance at the reporter and says, "Yeah, cocaine's expensive.
Cocaine's a hell of a drug.
Cocaine's not cheap. It costs a lot of money." And I heard that response, and I was like, "This guy needs to just take my money already. He can't lose at this point."
They should just box each other. Am I wrong?
At this point, I would give Dana the edge right? over Oscar De La Hoya.
And if you play UFC 4, they would also give Dana White the edge because he is a 4-star athlete in that game, which is insane.
It's almost like he controls everything that's going on.
Do you have some type of stake or power in this? Maybe?
I don't know. There's not a lot of times where I say Dana White's coming out on top this weekend, and this might be one of them.
Dude, MVP of quarantine. He's been coming out on top for the past 5 months, dude. The crazy thing is, right, like Cormier, that fight from a couple weeks ago, is considered like one of it didn't sell that good. It only but it did 500,000 buys. So, like, Dana White's like, I had a bad weekend. I did 500,000 buys. Like, that's great. When you think about a year ago, what MMA was kind of looking at, it was looking
when they
rough.
Signed that deal with ESPN, we had no idea what pay-per-view was going to look like for them.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Dana White's response to this, he schedules some big fights. So Dominic Reyes, Jan Blachowicz was already on the docket for that belt. And then we get word that Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira gets put in the works. Absolutely. Sign me up. That's going to be a fight that I definitely want to see. We also have Anthony Smith facing Aleksander Rakic. I'm going to go with that.
I still think it's Ratatat. Isn't that a thing?
It might be. Okay. But that fight is happening this weekend. And now we've got a couple of big light heavyweight contenders that are starting to put their foot to the path on their way to the title.
That is the interesting thing when a guy who has lorded over your division, or essentially two guys, I would say, have lorded over your division for about 10 years now between DC and Jones, now that both of those guys have moved on from the division, it is really exciting that because the wrap on the light heavyweight division, and hell, I just said it a couple minutes ago, is that it's one of the weakest in the UFC. It's
always been really shallow.
Outside of maybe like flyweight, it's maybe their weakest male division. But it is exciting to look and say like there's 4 or 5 guys that are all kind of claim to the top of the weight class at this point. The problem is that all of these guys are flawed in a way, and if there was one guy that was dominant, he's probably going to run through all of them again. Right. Am I wrong?
Right. And then, I mean, we see, and it's unfortunate that OSP fight got scrapped due to COVID, because it would have been interesting to see where he could have kind of fit himself into some interesting matchups. But 205 has always been a shallow talent pool. And now when you've got the king of the jungle taking his talents up to heavyweight, it opens up a lot of opportunities for guys, but there's some guys that have some questions to be answered. And I think Anthony Smith for sure is one of those guys this weekend.
Yeah. Where do you see kind of like this week? Because, we talked about it before the podcast here, but I'm not I'm not familiar with Rakic too much personally. Yep. So I could talk to you a lot more about Anthony Smith, and I do have an opinion on the fight. But what do you think of Rakic?
So in what I've seen from Rakic, he lost his last fight against Volkan Ozdemir. It was actually a close split decision. Could have gone either way. It wasn't one of those judging debacles as we're used to nowadays. It was his last fight against Jimmy Manuwa that was, although we didn't get a lot of tape on it, was pretty interesting to me because Jimmy's a seasoned vet at that division. And if you can knock off Jimmy Manuwa, it puts you in line to start fighting for those big fights. So, and what I've seen from Rakic, aside from fighting some no-names in his previous fights, in the 2 fights that he's had in those last 2 fights against Volkan Ozdemir and Jimmy Manuwa, he did a lot of different things. He showed a lot of different striking. He was able to grapple a little bit with Volkan in those short exchanges where they were up against the cage. Do I think he beats Anthony Smith in this fight? This one, for me, depends on which Anthony Smith shows up. And I think that you're probably going to jump into this in your analysis of Anthony Smith. But I look at Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira. I have a lot of concerns. It takes a hell of a beating to a point where I'm wondering why a corner doesn't step in and kind of, go to bat for your fighter. But then he comes off of, before that fight, he beats Alexander Gustafsson. He submits him with a rear naked choke late in the fight. And that comes after a fight with John Jones where, man, I had nightmares of that fight because it felt like it would never end.
Yeah, it's, John Jones went through a kind of a rough stretch there as far as like, I don't know if he's been interested in fighting these guys.
I don't think he has been.
There's no pay-per-view buys behind these guys that he's fighting. He's kind of just doing legacy at that point. And just kind of to talk about what you're saying there is when I look at these 2 guys on paper and not knowing a ton about Rakic, and just looking at their 2 resumes next to each other, despite the losses that Smith has taken in 2 of his last 5 fights, the competition levels aren't even in the same ballpark.
Yeah.
You look at this Teixeira, Gustafsson, John Jones, Volkan Ozdemir, Shogun. Like, that is just like the who's who of named guys, and I know each one of them is legit. Yeah. There's no shame in losing to John Jones, and especially if you took it to a decision.
And he didn't cop out in that fight. Remember, he did take an illegal strike. Right.
It wasn't competitive, but you're right. He didn't bail.
Right.
The Glover Teixeira one, tough to watch, and I think that's the biggest question coming into this is this too soon? What was the wear and tear like? This kid's he's still young, but he's taken a beating this early in his career.
He was
like
losing
that.
teeth, man. Like, I know they were fake teeth, but anytime
Dan
he loses
Henderson, though, didn't have teeth for most of his career.
I think Dan Henderson's a different human being.
Yeah, he's made of steel, that guy.
Yeah.
Rakic, the only named guys you talk about is Ozdemir and Manawa, and like I'm pretty sure like a strong gust of wind knocks out Manawa sometimes.
Ouch, yeah.
He's great. He's great, but he can't get hit. So
yeah, true.
All these other guys, who is it? Devin Clark. Justin Ledet, I know who he is, but he's not anything to write home about as far as like ranking in his division. And I don't even know the next guy. So this seems like they're trying to set up Rakic to be on his way up here.
Yeah, I mean, this would be his 6th fight in the UFC.
Yeah.
So, I spoke about, his last 2 fights. When you look at the names on paper, you're like, are those in the UFC or are they not in the UFC? And that just shows how thin the light heavyweight division is right now.
Yeah, it is. This fight is a pretty good depiction of what the division is because Anthony Smith, is kind of doing. They book some people the John Jones way, right? Where like they're on the come up. I think they did this with Reyes too, where it's like they're on their way up. Well, let's throw them in there with some of the guys with some name value, but are beatable. The Shoguns of the world are in the Dominic Reyes thing. It's the Chris Weidman.
Yep.
The guy goes up to heavyweight and you just smoke him in like a minute.
Oh yeah.
So you're going to get these fights with the UFC, but then you also have the guys like Rakic where it's like they're basically feeding him in a way it looks like maybe they think this is an easy win to get Smith or it's a chance for him to make his name. I don't know about you. I'm going to go with the devil I know versus the devil I don't, and I'm going to pick Smith to win this fight.
Sure. So as much as I would love to disagree with you, for me, I feel like Anthony Smith should win this fight. Does he win this fight? Man, I'm not willing to put my name on it. I think it'd be extremely interesting. If I had to put a bet, give me Anthony Smith. I think he gets it done. But, man, it's one of those instances where I'm wondering who's going to show up. And that's, man, if he does lose this fight, it's a big loss on his part because this is your opportunity to stake your name in this division and start making some real money in some of these big fights.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out to everybody at home watching, your boy catches a hot streak and people want to jump on. So Matt is agreeing with me this week. And he's probably going to get a win because I'm unstoppable. I'm undefeated in the past week.
Yeah, I mean, I may be 0-1 this past weekend, but let's not forget who's on top right now.
Well, buddy, you're going to be 1-1 coming off this. And the first week was a practice, so we said it doesn't count.
Sure.
Preseason.
Okay. I'll let you have the training wheel week this week. But
no, it's preseason.
So we talked a little bit about the light heavy division. A couple of different fights have been made. A lot of things to get excited about. The only name that hasn't come up right now, Anthony Rumble Johnson.
Yeah, I think you got to make sure he passes the test. First and foremost, don't know what he's been doing in his time.
You don't think
off.
they'll make sure he passed the test? You don't think he gets the Brock Lesnar treatment at this point?
No, I don't think anybody's in that realm. Like, okay, nobody gets the Brock Lesnar treatment until you come in and you're guaranteeing 1 million buys when you step in the scale. That's how you get the Brock Lesnar treatment. So, like, remember when Nick Diaz accused GSP of, like, poisoning his water or some shit like that? Like, that's the type of stuff that you get. When you sell 1 million buys, you can do what you want. Anthony Rumble, we don't know. We talked about heavyweight, like chasing after John Jones. I still hear that, like, there's a good chance, dude, I can't look at these people in the top 10 at light heavyweight and not say to myself, if I'm Anthony Johnson, a guy who's never held a title in the UFC, has a ton of potential and a ton of knockout power, to look at all of these guys. I'm pretty sure he's knocked out Glover Teixeira, right?
He's knocked out just about everybody on this list.
Yeah, so like go down, he would knock out any of the others. Like guys I'd be most interested in seeing him fight is a Dominic Reyes. I think that's the guy I'd be most intrigued on seeing. What would happen there. So maybe that's where you drop him. I bring up
his name because I feel like the lack of conversation with all of these fights being made. Yes, we need to wait to see if he's going to test, but why not leave one of these guys available for him?
I mean, he's been talking about coming off of retirement for a long time, too. So, I mean, until the UFC actually books a fight, there's some of these guys. I mean, Conor is is famous for this at this point. There's some buzz going around a weight division that he's in. Let me kind of jump on that buzz on Twitter and be like, hey, I'm coming out.
Let me just throw my name in there.
Yeah, and maybe he has a new strain of weed coming out and Rumble's like, let's get a little positive buzz, if you know what I'm saying.
I feel like that's always going to be a reference on this show.
Yeah.
I absolutely love it. But that's not the only fight that's going on this weekend. So, crafty vet Robbie Lawler, I feel like he's probably someone very similar to Frankie Edgar, where if you see his name on a card, you absolutely want to tune in. He's been on a very rough streak lately. I think he's lost somewhere like 4 straight against big names, but 4 straight nonetheless. Mm-hmm. He's going up against Neil Magny, who's always kind of another crafty vet, but he's been on a roller coaster ride, and for the most part, his last 3 wins have come against some people that are pretty low in that division.
Yeah, Robbie Lawler's coming off the fight with Colby Covington, where he absorbed the most strikes in welterweight history. Beat, I believe it was Nick Diaz by 1 punch, by the way, just to throw that out there. Nick Diaz versus BJ Penn, one of my favorite fights of all time. Yeah. So he ends up getting not finished in that. I think it ends up going to a decision.
Goes to decision.
Yeah, it ends up going to a decision, but he just absorbs everything. He has his moments, but he just couldn't keep up. I do have some concern because I look at Robbie Lawler and I think ever since that Carlos Condit fight has never really been the same. That fight was a 5-round war, and then he ends up going through another one now. He's got to be close to 40 at this point, if I imagine.
So. Yeah, he's about 38, 39.
Right around it. So he's on the back half. The thing is, he's going against a guy Neil Magny, who this is really a perfect opportunity to me for Robbie Lawler to get off the schneid, so to speak.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's Robbie Lawler's always been someone that I enjoy watching, and his title fights against Rory McDonald, Johnny Hendricks, like this guy's been in wars, war after war,
like 32, 33, like I don't know,
and they say that's your MMA prime. I don't quite understand that.
Yeah, no, they do say that, and there's certain guys, Frankie Edgar, Robbie Lawler, that come along and they prove that wrong, though.
Yeah, and when you're facing Neil Magny, you know that he's not going to run out of energy anytime soon, and he embraces that wrestling grind where if he's going to be able to get you down, it's going to be very tough to get up.
Robbie Lawler is really tough to take down, though.
I get that. Ben Askren would say differently.
I just want to I don't necessarily agree with
that's a joke. That's a joke. Don't listen to that. The man got ragdoll tossed over his head. I'm kidding.
Yeah, we can make this one short and sweet, though. I don't think there's too much to break down here. I'm going Robbie Lawler. I'm going to pick him to finish. There is some fear for me, though, that when I look at Colby Covington style and I look at Neil Magny style, there is a very similar template there of just constant pace
pressure
that could really get to Robbie Lawler. But I think that he comes out and he's able to push and pressure for the first minute or the first 5 minutes and get a finish.
Man.
He's got to decide if he wants to stay undefeated.
I can't go with you on this one. Actually, I'm more than okay to not go with you on this one.
You're not going to get undefeated, though.
Robbie Lawler, I can't pinpoint exactly what fight. Maybe it's the Carlos Condit fight. Got gun shy somewhere along the way. He was over-calculating, wanting to find the perfect shot. I think I saw that. I think everyone saw it against Colby Covington, and if it was that pressure, that's not going to get any better against Neil. Maybe you're not going to have to deal with as many strikes as Colby would throw at you. But Neil Magny, if he's going to come forward and he's feeling confident that he can overpower you, he's going to continue to press. And if Robbie Lawler doesn't pull that trigger, it's a 3-round fight. It very easily could end up with him getting grappled for 2.5 rounds, having one flashy round, and he loses a split decision or a unanimous decision. So I'm taking Neil Magny by unanimous decision.
Not by split decision, because that's impossible to predict.
I think I could predict a split decision depending on where the judging is taking place. If it's in New York, I would take split decision on whoever won the fight to lose.
Okay.
That's how
You're probably right. And I think that's just everywhere in the world because the judges aren't good. But yeah, so I think we're flipped here, and you're going to be wrong. So
I'm okay with you thinking that I'm going to be wrong. So we've talked a lot about MMA news, upcoming fights, big things to look forward to. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to jump into a different avenue, because this isn't just an MMA show. It's a great opportunity for us after this past weekend with DC Fandome having a huge announcement and having a really big event. Maybe this is a chance for us to jump into some of our interests.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot more that we would love to talk about, and it's been maybe a slow news week the past few weeks, and not much else outside of the MMA world that we wanted to get into, but that Fandom event just had things dropping left and right.
Big trailers.
Yeah, a million of them, from the Snyder Cut to the Suicide Squad, both movie and game trailers, and then coming up to the Batman, which is like the big.
Yeah, I feel like that's the one that caught everybody's eyes. The new Batman trailer.
Like, I know for me, like I wasn't like, hey, I need to go like watch this DC Fandome, but I knew that day that I was going to be waiting like for the moment the Batman trailer was available. Yeah,
I would definitely say it was probably the most anticipated piece of news coming out of that event, but maybe for everybody else, but for me. The biggest thing that got me excited was that Red Hood Gotham Knights trailer. So, new video game coming out, and for me, someone who maybe I'm not a huge fan of the Arkham or the Batman video games, but I know that there was a couple in there that I genuinely enjoyed. This game got me excited.
Yeah. Where am I at on it? Like, are we in the trust tree?
We're always in the trust tree, man.
Is this a cocoon of confidence?
This is our safe zone.
Okay. Nobody else is listening. I did not really play any of the Arkham games.
Plenty.
Okay, so listen, it's not to say I don't like them and that I don't have intrigue for them.
Sure.
I actually recently downloaded one of them that was like free with PlayStation Plus, and I have every intention on jumping in and playing it. I just personally, my single player games, I don't really love the beat 'em up style, like fighting game type things like that. I love the atmosphere that those games have. I love the character of Batman, and they're fun to play for a few minutes. But for me, they just don't have a ton of replay value to where I don't care about doing the side things. I didn't ever beat through the main missions.
Sure.
That's not to say though, when I saw this trailer, that it didn't, pique my interest a little bit.
I mean, you see the Red Hood.
Yeah, and so backstory from like that's Matt's guy. One of the first things I know about Matt is he used to have a hoodie that zippered all the way up that was the Red Hood.
Don't say used to. I still have it.
He goes to bed in it every night.
I still have it. I look for any reason to break that baby out, and you better believe I slept in it the night that I watched the trailer.
And if you go back to video 1 and from there, we've had this little guy sitting next to us. So
he's part of the set.
We are a pro Red Hood podcast.
I would say so, absolutely.
I
would say he, aside from Bailey, is our mascot.
Yeah, so we have a dog, and sometimes the Red Hood rides her around.
But when I look at this game and the games that came before it, to your point, I don't think they had a ton of replay value. For me, the fun was really in how stories were going to be told. Being introduced to different characters, they always did a fantastic spin on the Joker. And they do a really good job of just reintroducing you to characters and just making it fun along the way. Those beat-em-up style games, I notice that they just get very repetitive. I find myself just kind of button mashing and kind of flicking the analog back and forth just to kind of beat everybody up.
Yeah, listen, I don't like Assassin's Creed either. Like, this isn't exclusive to the Batman games. It's just that style of combat. It's appealing to me for the first few minutes. I used to love I don't know if you remember this game, like Jet Li had a game on like the PlayStation 1
Do I remember that game?
And it was like legendary for its fighting style because you could have people all around you and you'd use the stick to control.
Sir, he would walk and kick himself off of walls. That game was amazing.
It had like the Max Payne bullet time and everything to go along with it. So that game was dope. I do like have an appreciation for that style of fighting. But like I said before, I just don't think it has a lot of replayability to it.
Yeah, I enjoy them to kill some time. If I know I got to get 20, 25 minutes out of the way, I know it's a great game to pick up. But how do you feel about the movie?
The movie's a whole other,
different ball game for you.
It's a whole different thing, man. Like that movie, that trailer, they only have 25% of that movie filmed.
Really?
Only 25%.
And you wouldn't know it by seeing the trailer.
That's a better trailer than you're getting for a lot of finished products.
Yeah. Yeah, so, you get to see a little bit of everything. I mean, we've seen gritty Batman in the past. This past Batman killed everybody.
Yeah, it has some of the ambiance of the Bale Batman to it, and then I felt some of the violence of the Batfleck.
Oh yeah,
one with the I Am Vengeance, like that, fucking.
Do you bleed?
So much fucking power there, man.
It gets you excited then?
Yeah, dude, it was great. I do have some questions that I'd love to get into. One major question that I took from it, or a concern that I had from it. But let's first, what did you think of the story first and foremost? What are you taking from it so far?
I mean, for me, it was difficult for me to pinpoint which storyline they're going to go with. And really understanding which side of Batman we're going to see. To me, it felt very Batman Beyond-ish, so to speak. It had some hues of futuristic type Batman to me.
I thought when I saw him take off that helmet at the end, he looked a little bit like Nightwing as opposed to like a Batman. But it's supposed to be Batman Year 2. From what all the people who are far smarter than me are telling me, it's supposed to be Batman Year 2. Some really interesting things coming out of the filming of this, though, I'm finding out. First of all, like they want it to feel like an American city, but they don't want it like it. So they're filming in something that feels like Times Square, but they didn't want to just film in Times Square because it's just Times Square at that point. So they went to London, and they're filming in London, but they're setting up the cities. They want more of a Gothic feel to it. So a lot of the older like structures there,
similar to the way that they did with Captain America, the first Avenger.
Yeah, maybe a little bit like that, right? Like where they want it to feel like an American city, but its own American city. So something unique to itself. It's also it's based in the same time frame that the Joker's from. So that's interesting. It seems like to me that this is going to be one of those things where if it does well, maybe we can
start parlaying different aspects
into the other one there. Then the characters, like the Riddler, very beginning. I read that somebody actually figured out what the riddle was, and it's like, what does a dead man do when he lies, or something like that, or what? I forget the exact thing, but it's essentially like there's like some guy who broke down the anagram to it or whatever. That
you can always count on the internet for that.
Somebody got it, and once I saw the answer, it's just he lies still. So like he keeps like he lies still. He's dead, so he's lying still. But he lies still because he's a liar.
Because he's a liar.
What does a liar do when he dies?
He lies.
He lies still.
Intricate.
So it's a funny line. Like it makes sense. So you could have figured it out if you weren't a brainiac, but this guy, like college degree, broke down.
Oh yeah, he's breaking it down. Yeah. He's looking at different angles.
And then the most amazing thing from character is the Penguin. And it's rumored that picture is Colin Farrell, and it's like mind blowing. Oh yeah, looks nothing like him.
Nothing like him, and it's crazy what they can do since the last time we had Penguin and Riddler, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not a lot of people like Batman Forever. But Jim Carrey as the Riddler, always near and dear to my heart.
Yeah, so it's not my favorite one. It's not popular opinion here. I will choose like the Batman and Robin movie out of its like campiness and like hilarity.
You just like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Dude, be cool.
I love them all. I love Poison Ivy.
Chill out.
Like Uma Thurman in that is good.
The cast was epic.
We had a special appearance from George Clooney's nipples. Sign me up for that whenever I can. Sexiest man alive at that point.
Silver suit? Silver Batman suit?
Yeah.
Sign me up.
I thought you were talking about Alicia Silverstone.
No. Well, yes, I know Alicia Silverstone as well.
Chris O'Donnell, who like I really like just based on that movie. I think he's only done NCIS like LA or something since then, which I've never watched.
Props to him for being the only person who made it through that series of Batman movies as the same character besides Alfred.
Yeah,
tough, man.
Like Alicia Silverstone had already made a ton of money before she ever did those movies, so she didn't need to do shit afterwards.
Well, no. Well, what I mean is we had Val Kilmer in Batman Forever. You go to Batman and Robin, and we've got George Clooney. Huge upgrade, but
from looks, well, maybe they're both good-looking guys.
If you think Val Kilmer played good Batman, you and I are going to have a problem.
No, he's not the best, dude. Keaton's the best.
Yeah, Michael Keaton does everything well. He doesn't do one thing bad. It's the opposite for Val Kilmer. I feel like after Heat, he had some tough goes of it.
Yeah, Val Kilmer is another B-movie like king from the 2000s.
Maybe we go back and watch a couple of Val Kilmer movies and see if we can find a good one.
Do you like waterboarding?
Don't sign me up for that.
Yeah, so let's not do it. Let's not fucking do it. How about that?
Well, as you can see, we're going to have some trouble trying to figure out who our best Batman is. I think we know it's probably Michael Keaton. Do you got Christian Bale up there?
Christian Bale's got to be up there. I think Christian Bale plays both roles really well, but like it maybe I don't know what I like him better if he's a better Bruce Wayne or a better Batman. But I think everybody enjoys those movies.
Sure.
This has more of that ambiance to it, which is nice. Maybe a little bit mixed with the Tim Burton like darkness in a way. It feels a little bit like that.
Maybe this is a great opportunity for me to make another poll that I just won't put up on social media. So let's hear from you guys. Who's your favorite Batman?
I'm surprised you're not asking who their favorite Batgirl is, Matt.
Nope. See, I have realized that I've been tiptoeing on a line, and it's okay to dance on the right side a little bit. So favorite Batman, we'd love to hear from you. I think some of us are going to disagree, but...
So the concern I had, right, and it's when we talk about better Batman or Bruce Wayne. the biggest thing I took from this trailer, and I haven't really, I guess like maybe it's just my opinion, because I think the biggest concern for this movie was when the casting came out, right? Everybody looked at Robert Pattinson and was
Huge
like,
question mark.
is he going to be a good Batman? And I think he dispels a lot of the questions about his Batmaning ability in this trailer. Just the fight sequence.
Would you say he Batmans the hell out of this trailer?
Yeah, dude, he is the man who is a bat.
He is the Batman.
Yeah, Robert Bat, dude, he is killing it.
Robert Pattinson?
Yes.
I feel like I stole that from somewhere, but I haven't had a chance to say it, so I wanted to say it.
So the concern I took from it is we don't really get a ton of him as Bruce Wayne. We see him at a funeral, and he saves somebody, right? Saves a little kid from a car, but we don't actually hear him or feel the ambiance of him as Bruce Wayne. And what I would assume that is that they've only filmed 25% of the movie, and that's just the stuff they haven't done. But the other side of me says is his acting style is like a little bit dry in some senses. He's very serious. Maybe I'm worried he's not as good as a Bruce Wayne. I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful, but that's my one last concern I have for this movie is what kind of Bruce Wayne are we going to get?
It may even be one of those movies where he spends so little time as Bruce Wayne because they know of how his acting style is. My big concern is him trying to make a Bruce Wayne joke. It would be tough to see. I really haven't seen his sense of humor play out in any of his movies, so it'd be interesting to see.
Let me ask then, have you watched a lot of Robert Pattinson movies?
If you're asking me if I watched all of the Twilight movies, I did.
Yeah, so we'll do a whole series on that because we can go real in detail about the Twilight movies. But neither one of us, sadly, have watched another Robert Pattinson movie probably ever, and we're making these claims.
I was assuming that he was only in the Twilight movies.
No, he's Cedric Diggory in Harry Potter.
Okay.
And he also, so to give this man his due, I've heard nothing but great things about a lot of his movies.
Sure.
I really want to watch The Lighthouse that he did there. It's like a black and white film that takes place primarily in a lighthouse. It's gotten really great reviews. I want to see that. There's another crime thriller that just got added on.
I'm not falling asleep, but you start talking about a black and white Robert Pattinson movie. It lost my interest a little bit.
So I think you have to, this is where the thing with him is he's more of a method actor. And I think that's the best. Christian Bale is renowned as Batman, right? Yeah. And that's his acting style as well. So I do think he'll really buy into this role and become the role. But I think we should maybe do a little bit more watching some of these Robert Pattinson movies. Maybe we can get ourselves an educated opinion now.
Yeah, so,
and somebody let us know out there. If there's a Robert Pattinson movie that you've seen that is worth us watching, give us a idea as to where we should start. Because that's not Twilight 1, 2, 3, or 4, because I've watched them far more recently than I care to share with any of you out there.
I'd love to know more about that. But
lips are sealed.
This is what we're all about here at For Those With Good Taste, right? We want to take in content that we maybe don't understand or don't know much about and try to get as much information as we can so that we can give a valid opinion on it.
Yeah, and share with others what we like and don't like. So, like I said, again, Robert Pattinson, you're probably great. You've done a couple movies 12 years ago that I think are some okay, some not good. Love Goblet of Fire, though. So
I thought he was going to say love Twilight. I thought you were going to go through.
No, if you want me to rank those briefly,
I think we're going to put a pin in that because I think we've had all the Robert Pattinson and Twilight conversation that we can have today.
Yeah, when we start doing our top 5, what I think we're going to start doing is our top 5 most embarrassing movies that we can say we've watched, and I guarantee you to everybody out there in the YouTube world,
Spice Girls,
that I will fucking win.
I don't disagree with you. I think that you would win.
I will win.
But I do think I have probably more shame to my list. Yeah. I think you probably have more shameful movies. I think I have the quantity of more terrible and shameful movies.
Yeah.
But that's a debate that we can have later on.
Yeah, so I like to wrap this, just where our thoughts on this. I am super pro this Batman.
Sure.
He's violent as hell, and let us know I know exactly the atmosphere that I'm going to be getting into when I watch this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot to look forward to. Gotham Knights gets me pumped, but I'm equally as pumped for the new Batman movie. So
you trunk getting a little movement when you hear about Gotham Knights.
I feel like we will never go to an episode without having at least 2 trunk references.
Yep.
So with that, please, as always, like, follow, share, subscribe. We'd love to get some feedback from you guys on who you think is the best Batman and what your thoughts on the new Batman trailer. As always, guys, we're For Those With Good Taste. We'll see you guys soon.
We out. Later. out